my dear students, welcome to Teacher at Home. Today class we are going to learn the 21st chapter, Neural Control and Coordination. As you know, the functions of the organ systems in our body must be coordinated to maintain homeostasis. Coordination is the process through which two or more organs interact and complement the functions of one another. For example, when we do a physical exercise, energy demand is increased for maintaining an increased muscular activity. Supply of oxygen is also increased. Increased supply of oxygen necessitates an increase in the rate of respiration, heartbeat, and increased blood flow via blood vessels. When physical exercise is stopped, activities of nerves, lungs, heart, and kidney gradually return to their normal conditions. Thus, the functions of muscles, lungs, heart, blood vessels, kidney, and other organs are coordinated while performing physical exercise. Now, body, the neural system, and endocrine system jointly coordinate and integrate all the activities of the organ so that they function in a synchronized function. The neural system provides an organized network of point-to-point connections for acute coordination. Endocrine system provides chemical interaction through hormones. In this chapter, you will learn about the neural system of humans, mechanisms of neural coordination like transmission of nerve impulse conduction across a synapse, and the physiology of reflex action. Neural system. The neural system of all animals is composed of highly specialized cells called neurons, which can detect, receive, and transmit different kinds of stimuli. The neural organization is very simple in lower invertebrates. For example, in Hydra, it is composed of a network of neurons. The neural system is better organized in insects where a brain is present along with number of ganglia and neural tissues. The vertebrates have a more developed neural system. Human neural system. The human neural system is divided into two parts, central neural system and the peripheral neural system. Central neural system, it includes the brain and the spinal cord and is the site of information processing and control. The PNS comprises of all the nerves of the body associated with the CNS. The nerve fibers of the PNS are of two types, afferent fibers and efferent fibers. The afferent nerve fiber transmit impulses from tissues, organs to the CNS, and the efferent fibers transmit regulatory impulses from the CNS to the concerned peripheral tissues or organs. PNS is divided into two divisions called somatic neural system and autonomic neural system. Somatic neural system relays impulses from the CNS to the skeletal muscle, while the autonomic neural system transmit impulses from the CNS to the involuntary organs and smooth muscles of the body. Autonomic neural system is further classified into sympathetic neural system and parasympathetic neural system. Visceral nervous system is a part of peripheral nervous system that comprises the whole complex of nerves, fibers, ganglia, and plexuses by which impulses travel from the central nervous system to the viscera and from the viscera to the central nervous system. Neurons as structural and functional unit of neural system. A neuron is a microscopic structure composed of three major parts, namely cell body, dendrites, and axon. Cell body contains cytoplasm, which typical cell organelles, and certain granular bodies called Nissl granules. Short fibers which branch repeatedly project out of the cell body also contain Nissl granules and are called dendrites. These fibers transmit impulses towards the cell body. Axon is a long fiber, the distal end of which is branched. Each branch terminates as a bulb-like structure called synaptic knob, which possesses synaptic vesicles containing chemicals called neurotransmitters. The axons transmit nerve impulses away from the cell body to a synapse and to a neuromuscular junction. Based on the number of axons and dendrites, the neurons are divided into three types. Multipolar, with one axon and two or more dendrites found in the cerebral cortex. Bipolar, with one axon and one dendrite found in the retina of the eye. Unipolar, cell body with one axon only, found usually in the embryonic stage. There are of two types of axons, namely myelinated and non-myelinated. Myelinated nerve fibers are enveloped with scan cells which form a myelin sheath around the axon. The gaps between the two adjacent myelin sheaths are called nodes of Ranvier. Myelinated nerve fibers are found in spinal and cranial nerves. Unmyelinated nerve fibers enclosed by a squamous cell that does not form a myelin sheath around the axon and is commonly found in autonomous and the somatic neural system. Generation and conduction of nerve impulses. Neurons are excitable cells because their membranes are in a polarized state. Do you know why the membrane of a neuron is polarized? Different types of ion channels are present in the neural membrane. These ion channels are selectively permeable to different ions. When a neuron is not conducting any impulse, resting, the axonal membrane is comparatively more permeable to potassium ions and nearly impermeable to sodium ions. Similarly, the membrane is impermeable to negatively charged proteins present in the exoplasm. Consequently, the exoplasm inside the axon contains high concentration of K+, negatively charged proteins, and low concentration of Na+. In contrast, the fluid outside the axon contains a low concentration of K+, high concentration of Na+, and thus form a concentration gradient. These ionic gradients across the resting membrane are maintained by the active transport of ions by the sodium-potassium pump, which transports 3 sodium outwards for 2 potassium into the cell. As a result, the outer surface of the axonal membrane possesses a positive charge while its inner surface becomes negatively charged and therefore is polarized. Electrical potential difference across the resting plasma membrane is called as a resting potential. You might be curious to know about the mechanism of generation of nerve impulse and its conduction along the axon. When a stimulus is applied at a site on the polarized membrane, the membrane at the site A becomes freely permeable to sodium plus. This leads to a rapid influx of sodium, followed by the reversal of the polarity at that site. The outer surface of the membrane becomes negatively charged and the inner side becomes positively charged. The polarity of the membrane at the site A is thus reversed and hence depolarized. Electrical potential difference across the plasma membrane at the site A is called the action potential, which in fact termed as nerve impulse. At sites immediately ahead, the axon membrane has a positive charge on the outer surface and a negative charge on the inner surface. As a result, a current flows on the inner surface from site A to site B. On the outer surface, current flows from site B to site A to complete the circuit of current flow. Hence, the polarity at the site is reversed and an action potential is generated at site B. Thus, the impulse generated at site A arrives at site B. The sequence is repeated along the length of the axon and consequently the impulse is conducted. The rise in stimulus induced permeability to Na+, extremely short-lived. It is quickly followed by a rise in permeability to K+. Within a fraction of a second, K+ diffuses outside the membrane and restores the resting potential of the membrane at the site of excitation, and the fiber becomes one more responsive to further stimulation. Transmission of impulses. A nerve impulse is transmitted from one neuron to another through junctions called synapses. A synapse is formed by the membrane of a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron, which may or may not be separated by a gap called synaptic cleft. There are two types of synapses, namely electrical synapses and chemical synapses. At electrical synapses, the membrane of pre- and postsynaptic neurons are in very close proximity. Electrical current can flow directly from one neuron into another across these synapses. Transmission of an impulse across electrical synapse is very similar to impulse conduction along a single axon. Impulse transmission across an electrical synapse is always faster than that across a chemical synapse. Electrical synapses are rare in our system. At a chemical synapse, the membranes of the pre- and postsynaptic neurons are separated by a fluid-filled space called synaptic cleft. Do you know how the presynaptic neuron transmits an impulse across the synaptic cleft to the postsynaptic neuron. Chemicals called neurotransmitters are involved in the transmission of impulses at these synapses. Axon terminals contain vesicles filled with these neurotransmitters. When an impulse action potential arrives at the axon terminal, it stimulates the movement of the synaptic vesicles towards the membranes where they fuse with the plasma membrane and release their neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft. The released neurotransmitters bind to the specific receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane. This binding opens ion channels, allowing the entry of ions, which can generate a new potential in the postsynaptic neuron. The new potential developed may be either excitatory or inhibitory. Central neural system. The brain is the central information processing organ of our body and acts as the command and control system. It controls the voluntary movements, balance of the body, functioning of vital involuntary organs like the heart, lungs, kidneys, etc., thermoregulation, hunger and thirst, circadian 24 hours rhythm of our body, activities of several endocrine glands, and human behavior. It is also the site for processing of vision, hearing, speech, memory, intelligence, emotions, and thoughts. Human brain is well protected by the skull. Inside the skull, the brain is covered by the cranial meninges, consisting of an outer layer called dura mater, a very thin middle layer called arachnoid, and an inner layer called pia mater. The brain can be divided into three major parts: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Forebrain. The forebrain consisted of cerebrum, thalamus, hypothalamus. Cerebrum forms the major part of the human brain. A deep cleft divides the cerebrum longitudinally into two halves, which are termed as the left and right cerebral hemispheres. The hemispheres are connected by a tract of nerve fibers called corpus callosum. The layer of cells which covers the cerebral hemisphere is called cerebral cortex and is thrown into the prominent fold. Cerebral cortex is referred to as the grey matter due to its greyish appearance. The neuron cell bodies are concentrated here, giving the color. Cerebral cortex contains motor areas, sensory areas, large regions that are neither clearly sensory nor motor in function. This region, called as association areas, are responsible for complex functions like intersensory, associations, memory, and communication. Fibers of the tracts are covered with myelin sheath, which constitute the inner part of the cerebral hemispheres. They give an opaque white appearance to the layer, hence called the white matter. The cerebrum wraps around a structure called thalamus, which is a major coordinating center for sensory and motor signaling. Another very important part of the brain called hypothalamus lies at the base of the thalamus. The hypothalamus contains a number of centers which control body temperature, urge for eating, drinking. It also contains several groups of neurosensory cells secrete hormones called hypothalamic hormones. The inner part of the cerebral hemispheres and a group of associated deep structure like amygdala, hippocampus, etc. form a complex structure called the limbic lobe or limbic system. Along with the hypothalamus, it is involved in the regulation of sexual behavior, expression of emotional reactions, excitement, pleasure, rage, and fear, and motivation. Midbrain. The midbrain is located between the thalamus and hypothalamus of the forebrain and pons on the hindbrain. A canal called the cerebral aqueduct passes through the midbrain. The dorsal portion of the midbrain consists mainly of four round swellings called corpora quadrigemina. Hindbrain. Hindbrain comprises pons, cerebellum, and medulla, also called the medulla oblongata. Pons consist of 5 tracts that interconnect different regions of the brain. Cerebellum has very convoluted surface in order to provide the additional space for many more neurons. The medulla of the brain is connected to the spinal cord. Medulla contains centers which control respiration, cardiovascular reflexes, and gastric secretions. Three major regions make up the brain system, that is the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Brain system forms the connections between the brain and the spinal cord. Reflex action and reflex arc. You must have experienced a sudden withdrawal of the body part which comes in contact with objects that are extremely hot, cold, pointed, or animals that are scary or poisonous. The entire process of response to a peripheral nervous stimulation that occurs involuntarily, without conscious effort or thought, and requires the involvement of a part of central nervous system. It is called the reflex action. The reflex pathway comprises at least one afferent neuron, one afferent neuron, and one efferent neuron, approximately arranged in a series. The afferent neuron receives a signal from the sensory organ and transmits the impulse via the dorsal nerve root into CNS. Efferent neuron that carry signals from CNS to the effector. The stimulus and response thus forms a reflex arc. Below the knee-jerk reflex. You should carefully understand the mechanism of knee-jerk reflex. Sensory reception and processing. Have you ever thought, how do you feel the climatic changes in the environment? How do you see an object and its color? How do you hear a sound? Sensory organs detect all types of changes in the environment and send appropriate signal to the CNS, where all the input are processed and analyzed. Signals are then sent to different part centers of the brain. This is how you can sense changes in the environment. Sense organ. We smell things by our nose, taste by tongue, hear by ear, see objects by eyes. The nose contains mucus, photoreceptors, which are specialized for receiving the sense of smell, and called olfactory receptors. These are made of olfactory epithelium that consists of three kinds of cells. The neurons of the olfactory epithelium extend from the outside environment directly into a pair of brown bean-sized organs called olfactory bulb, which are extensions of the brain's lymphatic system. Both nose and tongue detect dissolved chemicals. The chemical senses of gustation and olfactory are functionally similar and interrelated. The tongue detects taste to taste buds containing gustate receptors which taste of food or sip of a drink. The brain integrates the different input from the taste buds and a complex flavor is perceived. In the following sections, we will be introduced to the structure and functioning of the eye and the ear. Eye. Our paired eyes are located in sockets of the skull called orbits. Brief account of structure and function it is given. Parts of the eye. Adult human eyeball is nearly a spherical structure. The wall of the eyeball is composed of three layers. External layer it is consists of a dense connective tissue called sclera. Anterior portion it is cornea. Middle layer is choroid. Contain blood vessels and looks bluish in color. Choroid layer is thin over the posterior two-thirds of the eyeball, but it becomes thick in the anterior part to the ciliary body. Ciliary body itself continues forward to form a pigmented, opaque structure called the iris, which is the visible colored portion of the eye. Eyeball, it contains a transparent crystalline lens, which is held in place by ligaments attached to the ciliary body. In front of the lens, the aperture surrounded by the iris is called the pupil. The diameter of the pupil is regulated by the muscle fibers of iris. Inner layer of the retina, and it contains three layers of neural cells from inside to the outside: ganglion cells, bipolar cells, photoreceptor cells. There are two types of photoreceptor cells, namely rods and cones. The cells contain the light-sensitive proteins called the photopigments. The daylight vision and color vision are functions of cones, and the twilight vision is the function of rods. The rod contains a purplish red protein called the rhodopsin of visual purple, which contains a derivative of vitamin A. In the human eye, there are three types of cones, which possess their own characteristic photopigments that respond to red, green, and blue light. The sensation of different colors are produced by various combinations of these cones and their photopigments. When these cones are simulated equally, a sensation of white light is produced. Optic nerve leave the eye and the retinal blood cells enter it at a point media to and slightly above the posterior pole of the eyeball. Photoreceptor cells are not present in that region, hence it is called that the blind spot. At the posterior pole of the eye, lateral to the blind spot, there is a yellowish pigmented spot called macula lutea with a central fit called the fovea. The fovea is a thinned out portion of the retina where only the cones are densely packed. It is the point where the visual activity is the greatest. The space between the cornea and the lens it is called the aqueous chamber and contain a thin watery fluid called the aqueous humor. The space between the lens and retina it is called vitreous chamber and is filled with a transparent gel called vitreous humor. Mechanism of vision. The light rays is visible in visible wavelength focused on a retina through the cornea and the lens generate potentials in rods and cones. As mentioned earlier, the photosensitive compounds in the human eye composed of opsin and retinal. Light induces dissociation of the retinal from opsin resulting in changes in the structure of the opsin. This causes membrane permeability changes. As a result, the potential difference are generated in the photoreceptor cells. This produces a signal that generates action potential in the ganglion cell through the bipolar cells. Action potential are transmitted by the optic nerves to the visual cortex area of the brain. When the neural impulses are analyzed and the image formed on the retina is recognized based on early memory and experience. The ear. The ear performs two sensory functions, hearing and maintenance of body balance. Anatomically, the ear can be divided into three major sections called the outer ear, middle ear and the inner ear. Outer ear consists of pinna and external auditory meatus. The pinna collect the vibrations in the air which produce sound. The external auditory meatus lead towards inwards and extends up to tympanic membrane. There are very fine hairs and wax secreting glands in the skin of the pinna and the meatus. The tympanic membrane is composed of connective tissues covered with the skin outside and with mucous membrane inside. Middle layer contain three ossicles called malleus, incus and stapes, which are attached to one another in a chain-like fashion. The malleus is attached to the tympanic membrane and the stape is attached to the oval window of the cochlea. Ear ossicles increase the efficiency of transmission of sound waves to the inner ear. An eustachian tube connects the middle ear cavity with the pharynx. Eustachian tube help in equalizing the pressure on either sides of the eardrum. The fluid-filled inner ear called labyrinth consists of two parts, the bony and the membranous labyrinth. The bony labyrinth it is a series of channels. Inside these channels lies the membranous labyrinth, which is surrounded by a fluid called perilymph. Membranous labyrinth is filled with a fluid called endolymph. The coiled portion of the labyrinth it is called cochlea. Membrane constitute cochlea, the resinous and basilar divide the surrounding perilymph, fill the bony labyrinth into a upper scala vestibuli and a lower scala tympani. The space within cochlea called scala media is filled with endolymph. At the base of the cochlea, the scala vestibuli ends at the oval window, while the scala tympani terminates at the round window which opens in the middle ear. Organ of corti is a structure located on the basilar membrane which contains hair cells. Act as auditory receptors. Hair cells present in rows on the internal side of the organ corti. The basal end of the hair cell is in the close contact with afferent nerve fibers. A large number of processes called stereocilia are projected from the apical part of each hair cell. Above the rows of the hair cells is a thin elastic membrane called a tectorial membrane. The inner ear also contains a complex system called vestibular apparatus. Located above the cochlea, the vestibular apparatus is composed of three semicircular canals and the otolith macula is the sensory part of the saccule and utricle. Each semicircular canal lies in a different plane at different right angles to each other. The membranous canals are suspended by the perilymph on the bony canal. The base of the canal is swollen and it is called ampulla. It contains a projecting ridge called crista ambularis, which has hair cells. The saccule and utricle contain a projecting ridge called macula. The crista and macula are the specific receptors of the vestibular apparatus responsible for the maintenance of the balance of the body and posture. Next is the mechanism of hearing. How does ear convert sound waves into neural impulses which are sensed and processed by the brain, enabling us to recognize the sound? External ear receives sound waves, directs them to the eardrum. Eardrum vibrates in response to the sound waves, and the vibration are transmitted through the ear ossicles to the oval window. Vibration are passed through the oval window onto the fluid to the cochlea, where they generate wave in the limbs. The waves in the limbs induce a ripple in the basilar membrane. The movement of the basilar membrane mend the hair cells, pressing them against the tectorial membrane. As a result, nerve impulses are generated in the associated afferent neurons. These impulses are transmitted by the afferent fibers, auditory nerves to the auditory cortex of the brain, where the impulses are analyzed and sound is recognized. So that's all about this chapter. The next is about the summary. So if you are interested, please do like, share and subscribe my channel. Okay, thank you.